All right, here we go. All right, so you can just take some off, right? Some things you might not be able to see too well here, but you'll be able to see it in the recorded demo. I'm not going to do a lot. I just want to, because you guys all kind of have an idea of how to use clay, right? Some of your pots, you may not need to use slabs at all. You might want to work with coils, and that's fine too, but I don't think I need to show you how to do coils because you know how to do that. So I'm going to roll this back up, whatever I'm not using, because anything that you're not using, it's going to dry out pretty fast. So I'm not going to worry about wedging it because that's going to dry it out a little more too, but I am going to hit it a lot to try to knock out some of the air bubbles. So it's really pretty easy to make a slab if you have a good table to work on, right? If it's really shaky, it's gonna be hard. You could do it if you had a clean concrete floor or a space that's cleaned off. You can do it on the floor, and that works too, as long as you clean up afterwards. All right, so I'm just gonna start with a rectangle. See this? This is cement board, so that it kind of dries the stuff out quicker, but so that wouldn't work for you. You probably don't have any anyway. So I'm just working on making it flatter. I don't really need it much wider than this, but I'm going to try to stretch it. I'm going to flip it around and turn it in a lot of different ways. I'm not really slamming it down, I'm just letting it drop. Let gravity kind of do the work. I let one end catch a little more than the other, so I take it and stretch it this way. Occasionally just tap it, make sure it's even. Sometimes the edges will get thinner, but that's to be expected. Good idea to rotate it around and throw it from different angles. If you're working on whatever surface you're going to work on, I would make sure if it's a sticky surface, like something that's shiny, has a gloss on it, like a finished table or something, I would get newspaper and put on it, or use a trash bag so you don't mess it up. You can see there's a lot of cracks forming on the surface on this. This is because it's getting stretched out and kind of dry, but I'm going to show you how to get rid of that. Again, working in different angles kind of helps keep it even. So when you're making a mug, you don't want your slab to be super thick anyway. So you want a good, a little bit smaller than 1/4 of an inch probably. That's about the last one I want to do before it starts. Like some of these are from air bubbles, so if I stretch it too much, I'll end up with a hole in it, and that's not good. So I'm going to move this now and get a piece of newspaper. All right, you guys still see this okay? gonna get my water bucket. So I'm using a bigger bucket of water just because it's easier for me. If you don't have a big bucket, it's fine. If you have, you know, something like this, that'll work also, right? Whatever you're using for water, that's where all your tools are gonna get cleaned off. That's where your hands are gonna get cleaned off. All the clay goes into that water, and then when it kind of fills up, throw it outside, like, or when you're finished for the day, toss it outside. You will need some kind of sponge. Like I said before, like, you can get a cheap sponge at the grocery store or something. I'm just gonna use one of these. So now I'm gonna start adding some water to it. This is just gonna help me smooth it out and get rid of these cracks. It'll create kind of a slip on the surface, and then when I start smoothing it out, that slip's gonna fill in the cracks. A lot of you probably have done this here after doing the slab roller. You made it thinner by stretching it out like that. This is just taking it from the beginning to that because you don't have a slab roller. I want to get just enough water on that surface to make it effective when I start using this. So I'm just using this card, right? Whatever you have that can work as a rib. If you have a putty knife, that'll work too, right? This one just has a broken handle. If you have something like that, that will work as a rib also. I'll just get the card wet a little bit so it'll help smoothly move across here. So I just hold this at an angle and start working sort of the high side down, like whichever parts are higher. I'm gonna work there a little longer and just work in different directions because all these cracks kind of run in different directions too. So it's a good idea to move it around. Don't worry about the tool marks on there yet. Those get cleared up as we go. Nobody's in the waiting room, right? Anybody having, like this clay that comes off of the card, right? That can go in some of these holes, some of the bigger holes, to help smooth that out. This helps make it disappear. If you haven't gotten your clay yet, you need to get over here and get it. I'm putting it outside every day. There's still a few bags of it sitting out there. So that means some people haven't come to get it. I saw a lot of you here. That was good in this class. I'm here basically till about 4 every day. If you can't get here before then, let me know. Maybe I'll leave a bag outside for you and you can come get it. Because you really can't do this class without this stuff. If you find some air bubbles kind of showing up, you can, and put your clay, like this clay that you're not going to use, like I just put it on the side of the bucket right now, so I might use some of it later. But if you have air bubbles like starting to pop up, take a paper clip, right? And I just kind of twisted it around so it looks like that, and I can sort of poke a little hole in it. Smooth it out. This side's about finished, and I'm going to flip it over and do the other side. And you can see how I'm working in different angles, right? That helps smooth things out. Now there's another way you could do this. If you have an old rolling pin that nobody ever uses, and you have like some paint stirrers, like those sticks, or some kind of ruler that has like 2 of them that have an even thickness, like that's close to 1/4 of an inch, you can lay those on either side of it and use the rolling pin to kind of roll out your slab. So it takes a little more effort. I think this way, I kind of like these slabs better. They just seem more tight, I guess, like all the clay particles are kind of lined up better this way. But you can certainly do it the other way. All right, so now I'm lightly going over it, kind of get rid of some of these tool marks. All right, so now we're gonna flip it over. So just lift up the paper and get your hand under the back side of it. And then I'm gonna lay it back down, that, and do this side. So you definitely, when you're doing this and working from home, like you want to work with a purpose, because you don't want your clay to dry out too much. Like this bag of clay should get you through this project. And I'm thinking, like, the other classes I've made, since you guys are like every other day, it's probably going to be due like next Wednesday or Thursday or something like that. So you'll have time to do it after today. And I mean, obviously you can work whenever you have a chance, but definitely you need to be working during this class, like when we meet again on Wednesday. Wait, no, Thursday. Today's Tuesday. All right, so on Thursday, I want to watch you work, right? I did it with the beginning class this morning. It worked out pretty good. I just kind of worked and they worked and everything was kind of cool. It was a lot better than I thought it would be. It's still not as good as actually being here, like seeing you, because I can pick it up and see exactly what you're trying to do. So I think a lot of you, when you worked with slabs before, you might not have put, like, you probably did all your texture and all that stuff after you made the form. You can actually add texture to the slab first and then build your pot from there, and can end up being pretty cool.
How you doing?
Good, how are you?
Everything all right?
Yep.
All right, let me know if you need anything.
All right, thanks. So you see I'm just going over it. And this one's smoothed out a lot faster because I've already put pressure on it from the other side. And you guys have questions so far? Nobody? You're all so quiet. Then I must be doing a great job. Or I'm putting you to sleep, either way. All right, so that's pretty even. You can see it's got a nice smooth texture. If you want, you can take a sponge and really get a lot of the water out of the sponge and just kind of go over it real quick so you can take a little more off there. All right. So now, things to cut with. You can use the same card, it'll cut. Now if I'm gonna make a cylinder out of something, like just a straight cylinder, I want to go ahead and measure and cut and draw some lines where everything is straight, right, and equal. So I also will need a base for this, but I'm just gonna cut. I'm gonna make a line without cutting this way. I'm trying to get the most out of this slab as I can. I'm gonna go smaller. Then all I have to do is cut a little bit off, and I just push that all the way down. any little piece of clay that you cut off, ball it up immediately, right? So you can keep using it, right? You can reuse it. All right, let's go ahead and put a texture on it. I'm gonna just use this, right? And once you put the texture on, now I can come back. This. Save that for something else. Maybe this. All right, so now I've got to cut straight down here. So, I mean, it's easy enough, right, to do squares, rectangles, cylinders. Those are all really easy, right? You can see the slab's nice and even, right? It's got a good thickness to it, and it has a nice texture on it. Now, if you have a form to put it around, you need to wrap that form in newspaper or something so that you can remove the form, because you don't want to leave it sitting and drying with the form inside it. So again, when you cut this, you'd want to cut at an angle here and an angle there, so that when you overlap it, it's the same thickness as the rest of the pot. Okay, and then you would put it on a base. But so I'm not going to put this one together. I'm going to set it aside and show you another way to do things. So we'll set that over there. Any kind of form will do, right? If it's open on one end and smaller on the other, then you want to make sure that the biggest part is at the top before you put the clay on it, so it can come out easily. If it's like this and you try to pull it out, it's going to get stuck, right? And you're going to have to recut it and open it up again to take this out. So it kind of defeats the purpose. But this way is easier. That's only if things are like open or have a weird shape, right? You want the big end open so you can pull it out. There are ways that you can make like angled pieces if you use a pattern, right? So this piece of paper right here, this could be a pattern. Now if I bend this piece of paper and attach it like this, I get a different kind of shape, right? So it angles up. It has a smaller opening at the bottom and a bigger opening at the top. So this is how you change forms, right? To go from just a straight cylinder to something better, right? That's what I want. I don't want straight cylinder mugs, right? I want you guys to push the limits of what you can do. Now, how do you make one of these? So if we want to take a piece of paper, I'm going to cut some real quick. So just take a piece of paper like this, fold it over, and then I can find something that's round. I can take this, because I know it's round, lay half of it over the folded part of the paper. The closer you get to the center point, the better this thing's going to be. If it's over, it's going to stretch it out some. Take a pencil or pen or marker, whatever you got. Trace that. find a smaller one. Do the same thing. Get your scissors and cut that piece out. So really, I mean, for most of you, this is like a refresher of what to do with slabs, but this is a kind of a new thing that you can do. Like you can make some really complicated forms out of patterns and pieces, right? Working with clay is a little bit like sewing sometimes. So even a cylinder itself, like you can cut pieces out of a cylinder wall and push them together. That's going to change the whole form. So now you have your donut. Right, like that. It's relatively even. So I'm going to cut this now on the folded part. Okay. And then I can sort of move it around and figure out how big it's going to be. Right? So when I get the size that I want, you can cut part of it off, and then you can attach it. So I didn't do a really good job making this even, but I can make the outside even. I'll use the old one, but that's how you do it. So you can make several of these parts and then start attaching these parts, and you can really build like an interesting mug shape, right? Out of things like this, right? Or it could be, this could be like the base of a mug. So if I take this and lay it on my clay, just have enough room for this one. Now you can go back. You can use a dull pencil to do this if you're going to trace it. I'm just going to go ahead and use this makeshift pen tool. Right. Trace all your lines first. Don't try to cut like this. Take the paper off, and you can reuse that paper form several times, right, to get the same one. It does start, like this paper is pretty thin, so it starts to get a little soft, but use it till it falls apart. All right, then to cut this, like I can use the same thing, or since I have a knife, I'm going to use a knife. If you have an X-Acto knife, an X-Acto knife will work okay, but it's not the greatest thing for like cutting like super wet clay because it's such a thin blade that it sticks. Just cut out small pieces at a time. Don't try to cut the whole thing out at once. Right? I can go across this way. Just take out this part. I can put this with my scrap clay that's going to get covered up. Right? Keep it balled up. Let's go ahead and cut out the inside. And if you do decide to use an X-Acto knife, if you're cutting on a table, I would get some kind of board underneath it, or just be really careful, like as you push down. If you can cut straight through the newspaper and into the table, don't want to do that. All right, so now I have this part. So I've got a pretty good angle right there. I'm gonna need to cut away some of this to make it fit evenly. I'm just gonna cut at the same angle that the pot is. Then get a fork. If you have a plastic fork, that'll work fine. Just score it. Don't use your best silverware. A little water for slip. Attach that piece. So this slab's really soft, right? So I don't want to lose my form. But I want to make sure that I attach it really well. Get it to stick, but I want to maintain the shape. Okay. Use my card. Fix that seam. Now I can flip it over. You guys see it okay? All right, move it back. You can put it up here so you can see it's at an angle. Now, like I said, you could do several of these. Like if I make these parts separate one time, because you can roll out a slab, use your pattern, put it down, cut out 4 or 5 of them, and then let them get a little drier before you actually start attaching things to it, like attaching them together. You can build a pretty interesting mug that way. I do want to address this inside seam. I can put a little thin coil of clay on there, or I can just kind of stitch it together. I want it to be smooth because you're going to see it. Anything that you're going to see should be taken care of, right? It should disappear. So that's pretty good. So now if I want to put it on a base, I'm just going to do this because I think that's probably about the best place to show you. Trace where it's going to go. I can trace the inside and get it, and that'll give me a good idea where the outside is. Cut it out. Get that out of the way. Let's see what I'm doing, I guess. You guys yell at me if you need me to explain something. Even if it's not perfect, right? I can clean it up later. I just want to get it as close as possible. Take my fork again, score where it's going to go. Flip this over. This is probably not going to be the greatest because I'm going kind of fast. It's all about the idea, right? And just use my finger to smooth out where it's going to go. There's definitely some trimming to do on there. On the bottom, but Also, another thing, you can use a spoon too. So if you have a plastic spoon or something, whatever works for you to get inside and clean up. And you can take a little bit of clay from your slab, roll out a thin coil, get it a little bit wet, lay that on the inside. Seal it down. I want to make those seams disappear. Just take your time and do it right, you know? You're not in any rush. I'm in a little bit of a rush, but you're not. Okay, so I've got this, you know, I can work on that outside. I can clean that up now if I want, or I can clean it up later. I want to make sure that it's sealed down enough. But this starts to make, you know, you can start seeing like the mug form kind of come out of it. Now if I take this, like this is way too big right now. I like it, but I'm gonna cut it down about 1.25 inches. So I'm pretty sure that's going to be bigger than, that's right about where I want it. So again, this is big, but it's, you know, you want to line up the outsides, and then if you have a form that fits what you're doing, this will certainly work. But then I would score and slip this seam, right? Make sure that stays together. You can really start to see a cooler mug show up. And this, again, this is really big, right? I wouldn't necessarily make your mugs this big. They are going to shrink some, but you have inside seam, you have outside seam to work with. Make sure they're all clean, and you make sure your rims are